Parry, parry, thrust, thrust. Good!
Robin Hood Men in Tights has a great line in entertaining fights. But my absolute favourite is today's subject, the ending sword fight. Funny jokes, slick choreography, beautifully contrasting movement, and nothing that overstays its welcome. For those of you who asked me to review the quarterstaff / big stick / littler stick / twig fight between Little John and Robin, stick around to the end, because we'll talk about that a little bit. I'm Jill Bearup, I'm an actor combatant, which means I have taken actual exams to prove that I can fake fight people safely and convincingly. This video is sponsored by A Bad Price to Pay for Love by Jerry F. Westinger, more on that later. If you'd like to get straight to the fight, then there will be chapters, but otherwise, if you need a refresher, the plot of Robin Hood Men in Tights goeth thusly. Robin of Locksley has been off at the Crusades, was captured and escaped, and promised this fella that he will look after his son, an exchange student named Chu.
Bless you!
Yes, thank you. Having come home to find his castle repossessed and his family dead, Robin vows to get rid of Prince John, which he announces at a banquet. While at this banquet, Robin also faces off against the Sheriff of Rottingham, who is done up in Alan Rickman style, naturally. We'll come back to him. The big Adventures of Robin Hood style castle fight scene around the 45-minute mark happens to rescue Robin. And, oh man, it's also a great fight because it really fits in with the style and tone of the film. Robin and his men go to the fair, which contains the archery contest, in spite of Marian specifically coming to warn him that it is a trap. While she's in the forest warning him, they do of course have a couple of musical numbers. Anyway, archery contest, Robin gets captured, and Marian's grand idea to prevent his execution is come up with a plan to help him and enlist the merry men? No? Okay. What then?
If you promise not to kill Robin, I shall do the most disgusting thing that I can think of.
Oh, and what's that?
I shall marry you.
I should point out that in Prince of Thieves, she is doing this to save the lives of a number of the merry men who have been captured, and also that the only reason that she has this bargaining power in that movie is because she is King Richard's cousin. But anyway, we get the dramatic ending with the abbot, and a wedding, and a potential hanging all at once, and Dave Chappelle saves the day with the merry men, and the sheriff runs off with Marian in a big curtain, I guess? Could I just interrupt for a second to ask where her shoes have gone? You know what, I probably don't want to know. Anyway.
Prepare for the fight scene.
Yes. Robin wins the fight scene, they're off to get married in a hurry by the rabbi, and then King Richard turns up and objects. King Richard is of course played by Patrick Stewart, pretending to be Sean Connery. Chu is made the sheriff.
And why not? It worked in Blazing Saddles.
I have never actually seen Blazing Saddles. Would you recommend it? Leave a comment, let me know. And everyone lives happily ever after, except for Rottingham, who is dying but is then brought back to life by the witch, and then is dragged off never to be seen again. The end. It is important to note that Robin Hood Prince of Thieves came out in 1991 and Men in Tights came out in 1993, because obviously there is a lot of inspiration being taken from there. That said, Cary Elwes is obviously meant to be a Robin Hood in the style of Errol Flynn, and they, you know, clearly rip some stuff from The Adventures of Robin Hood, or possibly the Disney movie, who knows. Having watched it all of twice now, Robin Hood Men in Tights is very funny, but it doesn't even come close to knocking my favourite adaptation off its perch. My favourite adaptation being Tony Robinson's Maid, Marian and Her Merry Men, which ran from 1989 to 1994 on British children's television. Yes, Tony Robinson from Time Team / Baldric from Blackadder. He was the Sheriff of Nottingham. He was very funny. I assumed, though I may be wrong, that Mel Brooks must have seen Maid, Marian and Her Merry Men, because otherwise, why would they kick off with rapping about the plot? Something which happens with surprising frequency in Maid, Marian and Her Merry Men.
It's pancake day, yes it's pancake day, yes it's pancake day.
This is Barrington, he's kind of our Alan Adale character who narrates the story, and yes, he is a Rastafarian rapping about the Christian festival of Shrove Tuesday, in a British children's television show. To be fair, I don't really understand it either, but if you are a British person of a certain age, you will absolutely start to hurtle down memory lane when you hear the opening bars. You're welcome. If you're wondering why the Maid Marian clips are so high quality, it's because I got them from someone on YouTube who did an AI-assisted remastering of them. I will link that in the description. And yes, I did ask before I just took them. That said, Disney's Robin Hood does include a lot of singing, so possibly Mel Brooks just saw it and thought, well, it's the 90s, let's add rapping. But with a hey nonny nonny and a here we go, we're talking about the sword fights, and the sword fights are amazing. And the sword fights aren't just good, they're good in exactly the way I want them to be. Let me explain. No, There is too much. Let me sum up. My very first stage combat teacher, and bless him, he's had to put up with me quite a lot since then, was Duncan Woodruff, and he told me that as a stage combatant, you have two jobs. One, be safe, two, be convincing. That's not to say that absolutely everything beyond that is just personal preference, particularly as be convincing incorporates a wide variety of skills which, well, I'm working on them, but there are lots of different kinds of fight, and any kind of fight can potentially be really good. Do you like wild, flashy, look at the glowing stick swinging through the air and lots of noise kind of fights? Do you like the closeness and intimacy of an unarmed fight? Do you like a big group fight, or do you prefer one-on-one? Do you like funny fights, flirty fights, fights with no dialogue, fights with a lot of dialogue? Or are you like me and you have your favourite tropes, but you can appreciate anything as long as it's well executed? Because I can love any film or theatrical fight regardless of tropes, let's say, but I do have a big soft spot for funny. Funny fights, men in tights, all of them are very, very good. While everyone in the fights are taking the fights seriously, generally, the action itself is inherently quite lighthearted. The music, the cutaways to various visual gags, the facial expressions on the characters, marvelous. So let's look at the ending fight first, and then I'm going to tell you about a novel I just read, and then we will look at the stick fight, and then we will stop talking. Well, I will. At least temporarily. The setup for the
Fight scene.
thank you, is basically the same as the setup in Prince of Thieves. Marian promises to marry the sheriff because we're out here saving lives, I guess. The ceremony is disrupted, and then...
Sheriff! You got your woman, man!
This is the only moment where we're less over the top than Prince of Thieves, because Prince of Thieves chooses to start this fight scene with Robin Hood swinging through the window. Carrie Elway's merely bursts through the door. And while this fight takes place in a location similar to that of Prince of Thieves, it's much more Adventures of Robin Hood in general style, for reasons that we'll get to in a second. So what you're currently watching is a lightly cut down version of Prince of Thieves, which is sped up so I don't get copyright struck like I did on that Secret of Nim video. So if you want to, you can slow the video down to watch for the details. And as you can see, I hope, from watching it, there's very little actual fencing. There's a lot of running around and swinging swords, but there's almost no traditional fencing on the flat. Pieces of sword choreography that are more than, say, 2 or 3 moves long, vanishingly rare. We are focusing on the scenery getting cut up and people jumping over things and falling over and climbing and all of that sort of stuff. This is a significant contrast to The Adventures of Robin Hood, where there is a lot of scenery falling over and tables getting kicked and candles and all of that kind of carry-on, but it takes place in the context of breaking up longer sections of sword fighting. The first thing the sheriff does in the Prince of Thieves fight is scar Robin's face, which isn't really relevant to us, but the first move of the actual fight is a lunge for 2, right hip, which we do in fact copy in Men in Tights. If you're wondering about the numbers, this is Pierce, my explanatory dummy, and the numbers refer to where you would be aiming on the body as a right-handed person. The second move by the sheriff is also the same as Prince of Thieves, but it is here that we diverge because we're going to make that pillar joke a little bit later on. Since the fights diverge so significantly from this point, we are not really going to be covering Prince of Thieves from now on. I know, you're all relieved. I will point out that the other similarity they have is cutaways to Marian. But in Prince of Thieves, Marian is trying, though she's unarmed and wearing what basically looks like a frilly nightie, to hinder the Sheriff of Nottingham in any way that she can. She kicks tables at him, she burns him with a candle, but most of the time she's just trying to stay out of the way, which is sensible as she is unarmed and unarmoured. Nobody actually goes near Marian in Men in Tights, so she doesn't move anywhere, she's just reaction shots. But my favourite thing about this fight is their amazing use of contrast, and specifically the contrast between the style of the Sheriff of Rottingham and Robin Hood, and so let me tell you about that. In The Adventures of Robin Hood, the combatants have, how do I put this, complementary energies. Basil Rathbone's Guy of Gisborne is more serious compared to Errol Flynn's more light-hearted Robin Hood, but their movements and choreography match up in style. In addition, Robin looks more serious in those circumstances where he's in more danger, and Gisborne looks more triumphant in those circumstances where he has the upper hand. Their vibes generally match, though. They are two men engaging in a fight to the death, and they both know it. The combatants in Prince of Thieves also have complementary energies. They're a lot more serious overall, and both parties are significantly grimmer. Once the fight starts, while we do have that bit with the hair cutting, I think the longest pause that we have is that bit where the Sheriff of Nottingham just randomly decides to commit sexual assault against Marian. again. Not a particularly light-hearted moment, is what I'm saying. Men in Tights, though, has completely contrasting vibes for the sheriff and Robin, at least in the first half of the fight, and it's beautiful. The first phrase of the fight is indicative of the tone that they're going to use, and so I invite you to look at the sheriff as he swings wildly 3, 4, clang, clang, which is actually a 4, 5, thrust for 2, and cut for 5 so we can make another Prince of Thieves reference.
Shocking.
Cute. This would be a fairly dynamic fight, albeit kind of a stagey one, because look at that telegraphing, if Robin were matching that energy. But he's not. So look at Robin this time. He parries and moves with such economy compared to his opponent. He doesn't seem worried at all. Look at his face. He's not even fighting back yet. And I love it. To further cement the fact that Robin is just very confident in this fight, at the pillar we have a hand swap, which is also probably a sneaky Princess Bride reference. So Robin can parry a left-handed 3, which is a 4 on Pierce here. He then swaps his hands back, parries 5, 2, avoids 5, and climbs up onto the high ground, Anakin! And then we get what is the probable title of this video, because you could not stop quoting it at me in the comments.
Parry, parry, thrust, thrust. Good.
Of course it's Robin who parries and the sheriff who thrusts, but that's not important right now. Parry 2, parry 3, avoid 1, avoid 2, and then Robin gives us a sort of tap attack 4 into the sheriff's waiting blade. No comment. And that's the first actual attack Robin makes. We move in front of the fire for a parry 2 from Robin, followed by attacking 4 and 2, and the sheriff gets burned. Oh, the humanity. That's a very classical pose you've got going on there, Carrie Elways. I appreciate that. And I also appreciate Roger Rees giving it absolutely everything in a flaily what even is happening kind of way, because that's what makes it work. We get an Errol Flynn figure 8, 4, 3, 5 from Robin, 2, 5, 2, 5 from the sheriff, 4, 3 from Robin, and then shadows. We do love an iconic shadow fight on this channel. Please note that after the sheriff gets burned by the fire, we move into a section of the fight where the sheriff looks a lot more competent, and the reason for this is because we're building the tension, and obviously while all fights need to have rises and falls in tension, we're doing it in this case so that we can shatter the tension with a joke. There follows another section in the style of Flynn and Rathbone with a shot reverse shot, where again, we're raising the tension so that we can shatter it again. In this case,
Hey! Oh, sorry.
breaking the fourth wall. Not that I'd know anything about that. Also, it's no fun if the sheriff is too easy to kill, right? We get a section with a bind, I love it, and then we get a very obvious reference to the Adventures of Robin Hood's dagger section, and then, oh look, the MacGuffin. Oh dear, the sheriff isn't happy about that. Robin ducks while the sheriff spins all the way around, attack high, attack low, and then there's a part where my Blu-ray dropped a bunch of frames. I don't know what happens here, so I'm going to guess, and you can tell me if I'm right. Robin says ha and punches the sheriff in the face. Ha-ha! The sheriff ends up in a chair, he comes at Robin with a dagger again, and oop! This being an unserious fight, the sheriff has a deeply unserious death, which I appreciate, and also, it's not even a death that sticks, because the witch offers him a bargain.
And I'll give it to you if you promise to marry me.
Such a fun time. It being a funny fight, you need to have those moments that break the tension so people can laugh, but it being a fight, you need to ramp up that tension a bit first, so that the laugh is bigger. Nothing in the fight choreography overstays its welcome. The references are funny as references, but they're also funny on their own, and I do appreciate the odd fourth wall breaking joke. And of course, Carey Elways and his absolutely elegant, though obviously still quite telegraphed, delivery of the choreography is just perfect. And such a gorgeous contrast with the sheriff flailing about. All of Robin's sword work in the film is just so crisp and clear, and it's not realistic, but it's beautiful and it tells us what we need to know and it's easy to follow, and I love it. In addition, as far as I can tell, this fight hasn't been sped up in post-production, so that also makes it easier to tell what's going on. And I do enjoy being able to see what's going on. So, nice work, Victor Paul, or given our recent experiences with IMDb, nice work, almost certainly Victor Paul. Now, this video is sponsored not by me for a change, I know you're shocked, but by Jerry F. Westinger's A Bad Price to Pay for Love, which is the third book in the Bad series. Not a bad series. I would not be promoting it if it were a bad series. I've read all 3 books and I really like them. But anyway, A Bad Price to Pay for Love came out on the 1st of June, but I got to read it before that because I'm special, clearly. And It's great and I love it. If you aren't familiar with the first 2 books in the series, you could read those first, but I've forgotten basically all of the details and it did not hinder my enjoyment of this book at all. A Bad Price to Pay for Love is a fantasy murder mystery, like the first 2 books in the series. There's a missing noblewoman, a murder victim who has had all the blood drained out of them, a bunch of bloodsuckers who are like, wasn't us, mate. There's a slightly shady society named after a blue flower, and no one is quite what they seem. It's fast-paced and fun, and I love Thessa and Corliss's friendship so much. They're a great double act. If you want to start the series from the start, I did talk about A Bad Place to Be a Hero on my Are Those Underpants Made of Metal video, so I will put a card up there if you would like to see that. It is a ticking clock murder mystery and it is also a great time. And I know that some of you bought the first and possibly the second book on the strength of my recommendation, and I know this because you came and told me that you liked it, which is great. If you did enjoy it, don't forget to leave a review, because reviews are love, reviews are life, reviews mean we don't get buried in the Amazon algorithm. Cool? Cool. Links in the description if you want to buy the book, or if you'd just like to check out Jerry's YouTube channel where he does comedy skits. That's at JF Westinger. I will put that in the description, and probably the pinned comment as well. Let's get back to talking about men hitting each other with sticks. So I would call this a staff fight, but I mean, it is for, what, 7 or 8 moves, and then it becomes a stick fight, and then it becomes a shorter stick fight, and then it becomes that game that you might have played as a child where you slap the other person's hand, and if they flinch when you're not moving, then you get to slap them for free. What was it called? Never really saw the point of that one. Anyway, the actual staff section is 2 diagonals, so right hand high, left hand high, 1 overhead, 2 low, duck, and then they just bang their sticks together a couple of times until... But obviously...
The principle of the thing.
So, I do particularly enjoy the moment where they mutually decide to just throw half of the staff away and continue fighting. And then we get parry 5, parry 4, parry 2, bind over, grrr, overhead again, fake an overhead and hit him on the foot, clack, crack. Note that they basically haven't moved at all in the first 2 phrases, but now that the sticks are so tiny and they've been going for a little while, they circle around each other to break it up a little bit. Slapsies. Is that what it was called? I don't remember. Possibly it had different names in different places. But anyway, Robin smacks Little John on the hands a couple of times before he bonks him on the head, smacks him on the foot, and Little John falls into the river. Which obviously is taken from Prince of Thieves, because in the Adventures of Robin Hood, Robin loses this fight. That said, the hearty laughing with your hands on your hips is a very Errol Flynn, Robin Hood kind of moment. The thing is, I don't really know what you want me to say about it. It's very funny, but in terms of choreography, there's not really a lot going on. It does help in terms of execution that Eric Allen Kramer is a fight choreographer himself, so he knows how to make this stuff look good. And it's also interesting to note that even though this fight is silly, the 2 combatants are taking it equally seriously. Again, you kind of have that matching vibes sort of thing. And I'm pretty sure that matching vibes is true of every fight that isn't Robin versus the sheriff. You have Achu and Robin fighting the sheriff's men, but though they're extremely silly, they're still taking it seriously, so to speak. When Robin is fighting the sheriff's men in the castle, he still has that beautiful fluidity of movement, but he doesn't look smug and overconfident and like it's not really a bother. He looks enthused and like he's putting in a matching amount of effort. He's just having more fun with it. And I think that's part of why the smugness works in that final fight. Because yes, we do expect Robin Hood to be overconfident and possibly a little bit smug, but if you have those times where he's being serious, then it gives you more contrast and makes it even funnier. So if you're on a Robin Hood kick, may I refer you to the right of my face for an Adventures of Robin Hood video? Or if you're on a Carrie Elway's kick, may I also refer you to the right of my face for a Princess Bride video. I need to go and record an audiobook, so you will see a little bit less of me over the coming weeks, but I will keep you up to date. All of the links for Jerry F. Westinger and A Bad Price to Pay for Love are in the description and the pinned comment, and hopefully I will see you soon.